Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new video on my YouTube channel, Anton GF. This is a new episode of the Jazz Flashes podcast, and it's an important podcast. It's a special one because, well, it's our yearly Bing Crosby podcast. We do an episode every year. For the last 6 years, we've done one, and this is number 7. We've talked about Bing Crosby as a jazz singer, as we've talked about movies that he's made. We've talked about him as a Christmas singer. We've talked about our favorite albums, our favorite songs by Bing Crosby. And this year, for the special Bing Crosby podcast, we're going to be talking about Bing Crosby as an actor. Yes, we're going to talk about his movies a little bit, but we're going to be talking about him as an actor. What was he like as an actor? Did he evolve over time? What kinds of roles were most suited for him? And of course, to talk about Bing Crosby, there is nobody that I am happier to welcome into the podcast than my good friend and fellow British co-editor of Bing magazine from the International Club Crosby, Mr. Malcolm Macfarlane. Malcolm, how are you doing this afternoon? Welcome to the Jazz Flashes podcast.
Thanks, Anton. Good to be with you again.
I can't believe it's been 7 years, Mal.
Oh, the years fly by when you're having fun, don't they?
That's true. Well, we always say that this is a podcast that as old, Bing himself would say that it might be a podcast that you might enjoy if you're snowbound or there's a bus strike or something, as he said in the musical autobiography. So basically, we hope you'll understand and pardon our ramblings, but we love Bing Crosby. And, that's the reason why once a year we get together. I mean, we're in touch quite a bit throughout the year because of putting together Bing magazine for the International Club Crosby. And we will talk about the club at the end of the broadcast. But it's a very special day, a morning for me here in the U.S. and an afternoon in the UK for Malcolm when we get to talk about Bing Crosby. And I was wondering, Malcolm, as I was preparing for this year's podcast, do you remember what, the first movie or first movies by Bing Crosby were that you got a chance to watch years ago?
The first one I saw, it was Blue Skies. There was a film, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis had made a film. I forget which one it was. And the supporting film, bear in mind this was probably early 60s, was Blue Skies. The one, Blue Skies, the one you got there. And I knew of Bing through listening to him on the radio. There was a 15-minute show on our commercial station, Radio Luxembourg, called Bing Sings. So I was aware of it, and the voice went in, just bit by bit. And then I saw the film, and I was very impressed. I was blown away by it, quite honestly. I thought it was absolutely tremendous. And the next one I saw was Anything Goes, the 1956 version. And again, I thoroughly enjoyed that. I thought Blue Skies was better, but I enjoyed that one. And so then I was a Crosby enthusiast. And I lived in a big city called Birmingham. And there were about, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 cinemas scattered around the suburbs. And on a Sunday, they would sometimes show old films just to fill the thing up on a Sunday. So I would scour the paper to see what films were on a Sunday, and lo and behold, now and again there'd be a Bing film. I remember traveling right to the other side of Birmingham to see Welcome Stranger. It was a bit of a battered copy, it jumped a little bit, but even so, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And even incredibly, I had to go off the other side of Birmingham to see White Christmas in those days. So those were my first films. Really, they made a huge impact on me.
And what was it about Bing's acting that you enjoyed as a viewer, or that you have enjoyed as a viewer over the years? Because the first Bing Crosby movie that I ever saw, and this is not very original, but it was White Christmas, one that he made with Danny Kaye and Rosemary Clooney and Vera Ellen. And my uncle, who is a big movie collector and has probably about 20 or 25,000 movies at home. Back in the days of Beta and VHS, he already had, quite a few. And then, DVDs and Blu-rays and all that. He even has more now. But back in those days when I was probably 11 or 12, and I would go to his house, he would play me movies, old noir movies and Alfred Hitchcock movies, and the Astaire and Rogers musicals. And then one day he played White Christmas because we were getting closer to Christmas, and I just first of all love the music, and of course, we're talking about. This is happening not in the US, because back then I was living in Spain, and so the movie was dubbed, so I couldn't really hear Bing Crosby's voice, which I think is one of the joys of Bing Crosby as an actor. I could hear his voice when he was singing the songs, but not during the dialogue because it was dubbed. But even so, I just really enjoyed that film because of the comedy, because of the music, and also because of just the portrayal of Bing Crosby's character as just a caring person that would do anything to help his friends, and also just the rapport that he had with the rest of the actors in the film. So what was it, Malcolm, would you say that you really enjoyed, or that made a big impact on you about Bing as an actor?
Well, it was the natural, likable approach that he had. He was a likable personality, not an excessive ego, a normal man you might meet in the street and get along with. And that's how he came across. And of course, the speaking voice as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, a very pleasant speaking voice. And they were nice films, generally. We left the cinema feeling happy, and you wanted more. Yeah. Of course, the way he started way back, the first one was King of Jazz, when he didn't really act in that; he just sang in it. The 4 shorts he made for Senate in 1931. He was learning his craft under Max Sennett's guidance, and he wasn't great. He was a bit of a comedy performer. The following year, after he came back to complete his contract for Senate, noticeable improvement. He matured as a person, as a singer, and Blue of the Night, when he sings "Where the Blue of the Night" at the end, it's a tremendous film, really, very, very likable. Of course, that's when he made, that year 32 was when he made The Big Broadcast, his first big film, and he was a bit wooden in that. He couldn't say he was a great actor, and probably the next few years they weren't great acting performances, but he was a likable person in them, and of course the singing. First time when he really became the normal Bing Crosby character, I thought, was Pennies from Heaven in 1936.
And I do have Pennies from Heaven here that I can show. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about this movie, because well, there's many reasons why I like this movie. And I do agree with you. I think that this is a turning point in Bing's film career in the 1930s. Most of the movies that he made in the 30s were musicals, really. I mean, I would say all of them were musicals. But there's many reasons why I like this movie particularly. One of them is what you just mentioned. Bing Crosby, creates this persona for himself. He comes into his own, so to speak, as an actor in this film. The score is wonderful, and then there's Louis Armstrong, and I think it's important to note that Louis Armstrong gets equal billing in this film, which is a film from 1936. This is way before we're talking about the civil rights movement or anything like that. And Bing Crosby, who was huge friends with Louis Armstrong, who admired Louis Armstrong as much, if not more, than Louis Armstrong admired him, gets equal billing for Louis Armstrong in a movie in 1936. Now, maybe the songs that Louis Armstrong got were not up to the quality that he had as an artist, but just the fact that he was sharing billing with Louis Armstrong in 1936 in a movie like this is just a historical moment, I would say. What do you think about this movie?
It's a pity they haven't got him on the front, Louis Armstrong's name on the front of the.
That's right. It was, though, in the original poster that that was circulated at the time. His name was on there, but unfortunately not in this DVD copy.
Pennies from Heaven is important for another reason. Bing signed for Paramount in 1932, and then the contract was renewed, but he was given the chance to do an independent film every now and again. And Pennies from Heaven was the first independent film he made. And I think there's probably a different approach. Probably he was more conscientious, perhaps, I don't know, having more power over what happened in the film. But a great film. The songs are great. So Do I is one of my favorite songs from that film. Super film. Of course, until Pennies from Heaven, he'd gone through several light things with Paramount. But another one he didn't make for Paramount was Going Hollywood. Made for MGM because of the Marion Davis connection. And that was an interesting film. I was very impressed with it the first time I came across that, because again, his singing in that was incredible. But it was a bit dramatic. The dramatic bit when he sings Temptation, when he's supposed to be drunk and he's upset about losing his girl and so on. Yeah. And of course, another one I particularly liked in those early films is Mississippi.
Oh yeah,
a costume drama. A bit of drama in that. Even was that his first fight scene? I think it probably was. And he has to fight the big bully in the saloon, and the gun goes off and the bully's killed. And then he carries on singing down by the river. He gets back on the stage and finishes off Down by the River. I thoroughly enjoyed that film. And it's something different. But then he became, as we said earlier, it became the natural being in Pennies from Heaven. And that continued from then on, really, apart from the odd exception, which perhaps we'll come to later on.
You mentioned the Max Sennett shorts, which were two reelers that he made with Sennett, who was one of those pioneering directors in Hollywood, starting in the silent era and then trying to adapt to the talkies when they started in the late 1920s, early 1930s. I will tell you that I have always been fascinated by those shorts that he made with Sennett because, well, for many reasons. I think the main thing for those, or the main attraction for those, is obviously the music. It's clear that the attraction that Hollywood had for Bing Crosby was the fact that he could just present his music to a wider audience, than he could with records and radio. So there was another medium that he could use. And to me, I've always found it interesting that for those shorts, there is a mixture of slapstick comedy and romance, and then the songs. Yes. Whatever song it is, Vita Zen My Dear, or whatever song he's singing on those, the song is important, but there are other elements to the shorts that were just about 20 minutes long or so, not much longer than that. But there's the romantic aspect of him as a romantic crooner, but at the same time, a lot of slapstick comedy that kind of carries over from the silent era. I mean, I've seen them many, many times, and even though it's been more than 100 years, close to 100 years that since they were made, about 90 odd years, I still find them funny, and I still enjoy seeing him sing, because I think it's the closest thing to like a music video that was done in those days. Those Vitaphone shorts, the Max Sennett shorts. They were, to the 1920s and 30s, what later on the 80s, 90s, and today we have music videos.
Yes. You say you've seen them many times. The Bing Crosby club here in the UK, every year used to have a meeting in Leeds, and one man had a projector, but the only films we had were the Sennett shorts. So we saw them year after year after year, but we still liked them. Yeah, and you touched on the romantic. It was a good formula, the Sennett formula, but the romantic side, of course. as the years went by, Bing hated the romantic scenes, the kissing scenes, and you can see when I mean, when he kisses somebody, it's like kissing a wall, and there's no kind of emotional passion in it because he just hated those scenes.
I mean, it was well known that he didn't like to sing the words "I love you" in a song. That seems to be true. When I first read that, I thought that was just a rumor or some sort of lie, because how could Bing Crosby, one of the greatest romantic singers, one of the greatest crooners, not like to sing the words to the phrase that would be the most typical in a romantic song. And of course, then came Cole Porter and wrote a song for him that simply said "I love you." But it seems to have been true that he disliked singing those words and that he didn't like the romantic scenes.
Mm. Yes, I Love You, the 1944 #1 hit he had, the Ik liebe dich, you pronounce it better than I can, song I Love You, the Grieg version. And of course, I Love You, Samantha. So I just wonder about that, really. Perhaps if he was being asked by a songwriter, he probably said, try and avoid the words I love you because it's cliched. Perhaps that's where it came from. I don't know. Mm-hmm.
Well,
I do smile at the romantic scenes, really. I mean, all right, a different time. You don't expect to see Bing Crosby nude or anything like that, but not much passion in the kissing. It just like kissing a wall and standing there for a while.
Yeah, and plus in those days, anything having to do with love or personal relationships, was presented in a very different way. There was a lot of there were a lot of things that were left unsaid, and that were just presented visually in a completely different way, especially after the Hays Code came into being. But Bing Crosby made some movies before the code came into being, and so it's interesting to see how directors in those days were attempting to present things having to do with love and stuff like that.
I don't know if you've seen the film Too Much Harmony.
Too Much Harmony. Yeah, I was thinking about that one in particular.
At the end of the film, there's a song called "Bucking the Wind," and when all these scantily clad ladies are dancing around, and the wind comes and blows the clothes away. I'm sure that must have been before the code came into effect.
Absolutely, and so was Going Hollywood, which you mentioned before.
And he never recorded "Bucking the Wind," which, I mean, they've made it such a big thing in the film, but he never recorded it. Strange that. I don't think he ever sang it on radio either, as far as I can remember.
There are a lot of songs like that in the Bing Crosby discography. Songs that he never recorded commercially, even though they were in movies, or he may have sung them once or twice on his extremely popular radio show. And I've always wondered about that, but I guess that as things were, he was already recording a lot of songs in those days. So maybe they were trying to not flood the market with just Crosby product, and they would just choose some of the songs that they thought would be most suitable for him.
So from going back to the acting side, from Pennies from Heaven, he gradually improved, I felt. He learned his craft. When we get to films like Rhythm on the River and Birth of the Blues, he's a good actor, I think. A good actor. He's really doing well. And Holiday, of course, which we all know backwards. Because he had to be a bit of a nasty character at times, didn't he, there, to stop the Marjorie Reynolds going off to Hollywood and all that. But generally, he was a likable personality in that. And of course, we get the right ending, don't we? Which we've just had another Crosby meeting over here. Jason Lydiard organises it, and he showed Holiday Inn as the coloured version to finish the afternoon. And that final scene when he appears on the scene and whistles and joins in singing the song with Marjorie Reynolds. It's a lovely moment, quite emotional. It always gets me. Actually, when I think back, a lot of Bing's films get me quite emotional. Little Boy Lost, which we'll come to
Yes.
later, particularly gets me. As does Blue Skies. That's and he comes at the end and sings the song, and they're reunited. It's a lovely moment, and no one would think of me as an emotional person. Who tend to hide my feelings, but those things get to me. They really do.
Well, there's something about those movies where, that happens to me as well. Happens in White Christmas, of course, at the end.
Yes.
Of course, in that case, we're, paying tribute to a person and on screen. And, that always gets me, when something like that happens. But it is true that there is an emotional element to a lot of these Bing Crosby movies. And it's interesting because I think Bing Crosby created this persona of sort of like an everyman, where, he wouldn't talk too much about his feelings. He was kind of happy-go-lucky, and present himself as somebody that, of course, cared about people, but didn't necessarily show his emotions, or uh, he didn't wear them on his sleeve, so to speak. But the movies somehow do have that element that makes
Yeah.
you emotional, makes you shed a tear or two. And I think that, has a lot to do uh, with the way the scripts are written. The scripts are written in such a way that they kind of lead to a specific ending that the writers have in mind. And a lot of the endings do have, I think, that element of not so much surprise, but emotion to them.
Mm. Well, Gary Crosby had an interesting quote, didn't he? He said something like, someone saying, Bing doesn't care, does he? And Gary said, he cares tremendously. He's very sensitive. He just has a hard job showing it, which, which that was the Crosby character in films as well, wasn't it? Going back to Holiday Inn and on into the 1940s, um, the road films are underway by then, and
And I
that
have
was
Holiday Inn right here.
yeah, yeah. The road films that started in 1940 and quickly gathered pace. Zanzibar, then Morocco. I've always felt Road to Morocco was the best one of the road
And
films.
I agree. I think it is the best one for several reasons, and we can talk about that. One of the reasons is the music. I just think some of the songs, "Moonlight Becomes You," "Road to Morocco," those are just fantastic songs. Very witty, well written, great
Mm.
lyrics, just standards. "Moonlight Becomes You" is a good example. And I will say, I first heard "Moonlight Becomes You" by Sinatra and Dorsey
All
before I
right.
before I actually heard the Bing Crosby version. And of course, they're very different versions, but I do favor the original Crosby one. So, what is it about Malcolm, the road movies that is so appealing? Because some of them, they have their silly moments, and a lot of them are ad libbed, which I think is a plus for me. But what is it about those movies that has made them so enduring and so interesting all these years later?
Well, fast moving, two great characters, um, a bit of romance, bit of singing. It was they were good scripts. They're very good scripts, I thought. I mean, I can say something controversial here. I don't think it mattered whether Dorothy Lamour was in it or not, as long as there was a lady uh, who was there for the boys to chase after. But the Dorothy Lamour fans will kill me for that. But I just wondered how vital she was. She was big star when she first got involved in Singapore, um, and then she was still an important star for the next few years. But then I wonder whether she was really necessary. But then, of course, we come to Hong Kong, and there was a huge outcry because she wasn't in it. But they gave her a nice little cameo role in that, I thought. Yeah. Anyway, rambling on, moving away from the road films. Uh, Bing, of course, happy-go-lucky in the road films. And then, of course, Going My Way, plays a priest. A very controlled performance.
Mhm.
Still the Bing Crosby character, very controlled, I thought.
Father
It was,
O'Malley, which he actually became a character for not just Going My Way, but also Bells of St. Mary's. And, Bing Crosby, that's something that I've always found interesting. And maybe we could mention something about this. Of course, Going My Way was also one of the first Crosby films that I ever saw. From 1944, his Academy Award winning movie. Leo McCarey, who I think is a fairly underrated director. I've always, enjoyed his work. And it has Barry Fitzgerald as well. Bing Crosby plays a Catholic priest. How much do you think, Malcolm, that his upbringing as a Catholic, how much of a role do you think that played in Bing Crosby accepting to play this movie, when I would say that being a Catholic in the United States was not the most popular thing, to say the least?
No, no. Of course, he always said that he modelled the O'Malley character on some of the priests he knew from Gonzaga, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
It must have been, well, we know he was concerned about taking it on. But I think McCarry talked him round, and no doubt he talked to some of his priest friends to get their guidance. And it was done very sensitive. And of course, there was a priest on the set watching everything as well. Yeah, great film. Great film.
I think one of the reasons why the film is so successful, besides Bing's own performance, is the rapport that he has with Barry Fitzgerald.
Yes, yes. Yeah, Barry Fitzgerald was superb, wasn't he? I mean, they're both nominated for the Oscar. The last time that ever happened, wasn't it? Because after they changed the rules, you couldn't be both nominated from the same film, I don't think. Anyway, Barry Fitzgerald had a super character, which of course he reprised in Welcome Stranger and Top of the Morning.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's when, all right, he got the Oscar for Going My Way. You could argue that his performance was even better in Bells of Mary. He was nominated there, but he lost out to Ray Milland, I think, didn't he? From but if you're talking about acting, you really got to go forward to the 50s, in my book. And you were asking about perhaps underrated films. Little Boy Lost. Tremendous acting performance. Again, very emotional. Superb. But The Country Girl blew me away. It still does blow me away. His acting in that is absolutely superb. And if ever he deserved an Oscar, that was it, really. Pity Marlon Brando was around at the time to pick it up. Another film where he did some very good acting, but I don't like the film, and I wish he, in a way, never made it. Man on Fire.
Uh-huh.
He plays a father trying to hold on to his son, where his ex-wife wants custody. He's not a pleasant character in it. Starts out as a nice, easygoing being, and then he turns nasty as he fights for his son. Wonderful performance, but as I say, it's not. It's not nice to see Bing being that nasty. The film, I don't think it's particularly successful. I mean, it's never shown on television now. Never heard of. I mean, I've seen it. Have you ever seen it?
I have seen it. It's been a long time, and I would like to see it again, really. But it's one of those films that I remember, seeing a long time ago. But I would be, hard pressed to tell you if I enjoyed it or not, since it's been such a long time.
Well, why it's in my mind at the moment, I don't know if you've been watching them. David Duncan from Australia has been putting together a wonderful series called The Hollywood Years. And each episode, which is coming out at weekly intervals, covers a particular year. And he's just finished 1957. It's just come on the internet. And it's got a lot from Man on Fire, which reminded me just what a nasty character being played, how well he played it. Of course, he didn't sing in that. He had made a record called Man on Fire, which they used over the opening credits, but he doesn't actually sing in the film, which is appropriate, really. Yeah, it's riveting acting. So I wish in a way he never made it, but there we are. He do. Another film I wish he never made, Say One For Me, when he plays the priest again. All right, Bing's okay in it. But it's, I don't know, I didn't like the story. Songs weren't great. There's a very good song called The Secret of Christmas in it. But again, I don't know, didn't do much for Bing's image or his reputation in my book. Then he made High Time the following year, which was far much more like a Bing Crosby film. Likeable character and a bit of romance and all the rest. Yeah. I suppose I'm digressing really, having moved on from the priest films in the.
No, I think you said something interesting regarding Bing Crosby in the 1950s. With movies like Country Girl, which is one of my all-time favorite Bing movies, and I would say one of my all-time favorite 50s movies, really, for the whole decade. He plays really a great role, and he does it in a very appealing way. But I agree with you that there is a certain, and I think noticeable change in the 1950s, where Bing Crosby's playing different characters from what he had been playing in previous films. Not just because they're more serious, because to a certain degree, Going My Way was a movie that had some serious messages, and his character there is a fairly serious character as well. But in the 1950s, there seems to have been a change in the kinds of roles that Bing Crosby was going for. You mentioned Little Boy Lost, The Country Girl. Why do you think Bing Crosby decided in the 1950s to go for this kinds of roles that were just a lot more dramatic? Do you think he was trying to be accepted as a more serious actor, as a more legit actor?
No, I don't think that particularly. I think he just wanted more meaningful roles rather than fluffy singing films, really. Just For You, serious topic there, the daughter and the son gets alienated from him and so on. That's I mean, when you watch that, you just wonder about what was happening in the Crosby home at that time, don't you? Gary was perhaps falling out with his father, and Just For You, we have the same scene where the son storms off and goes and joins the forces and goes off to Alaska. Quite dramatic. Mr. Music, that was a bit more meaningful, wasn't it? A songwriter who's lost the knack of writing songs and needs to be reinvigorated. And that was meaningful. It was had a lot more to it, I thought, than some of them. And of course, you go back to Riding High, I suppose. He's about to get engaged. The father-in-law wants something that he's not prepared to do, so he leaves, and a new romance starts. So that had something going for it as well, didn't it?
I feel like one of the elements that I think is important to think about as we move from the 30s and 40s to the 50s and later, is that the music becomes less important in the movies, whereas the music was of paramount importance in the early films and through the 1940s. Of course, there are exceptions, but when we're thinking of movies like the ones that you've just mentioned, I think the music is secondary. In fact, you were mentioning, I think, High Time, where he recorded a song, but it didn't really have much of a connection to the movie itself. So that's why I'm thinking that Bing Crosby was attempting to maybe not just be recognized as a more serious actor, but just find different challenges within his work as an actor, because he had created a certain persona for himself. And I think that playing a character like the one in The Country Girl would be kind of a challenge, something difficult for him to do. And I think, after so many movies that in many cases were very similar, he was trying to find something different to do as well.
I think you're right. I mean, talking about songs in films, Billy Wilder said he couldn't understand musicals. Why would any character stand up and sing a song? And thinking back to Emperor Waltz, he very cleverly made it natural. Bing's walking along, just singing into himself. Friendly Mountains. He's humming to himself on an island, and the lady challenges him to sing the song, so he sings it to her. And another time they're trying to charm the dog, so the dog reacts well to a song. Billy Wilder was quite clever the way he put it in. Frank Capra, of course, he didn't want Bing to sing to mime. He wanted him to sing naturally, didn't he? And the one in Riding High, what was the song? Sunshine Cake. Sunshine Cake. They sang that live, and very interesting the way that was done in the film.
I think there are quite a few cases in Bing's films where the songs actually come in and they just meld, seamlessly with whatever is going on screen. A little bit just like in a Fred Astaire movie like Top Hat, when they're caught in the rain and they sing,
Yes.
"Isn't this a lovely day?" It just sort of looks very natural that that's what they would do. And I'm thinking, for example, on Road to Morocco, when he sings Ho Hum, it just makes a lot of sense that he would do that. It's almost like he's talking the song more than singing the song. And I think in a case like that, it's very effective. And that's one of the reasons why I think that Morocco is probably the most interesting and best of the road to movies. Maybe our audience would not agree with that because everyone has their own, favorite road movies. But I think that when that is achieved, it just makes it much more interesting from the point of view of the viewer to see that the music is part of what you're seeing and not just something that is just thrown in there because, the director or the script writer feels like.
Yes, Bing was a master at putting the songs over in films. He could do all kinds of other things whilst he was doing it. I mean, High Society. I Love You, Samantha. He gets dressed, puts a bow tie on, does all kinds of things. Well, all right, he's miming. We know that, but to do that takes some doing to remember that. Put your cufflinks on. I mean, it brilliantly done, and so many examples of how he puts them over well in films. I'm trying to think of another one. It'll come to me in a moment. Several of them. Well, in one is Welcome Stranger. He's shaving, with the electric razor, having to do that. Another one is fishing in Welcome Stranger. And then, of course, there's the barn dance when he's singing that song. No, he's absolutely well. I know he was decided how he would sing it, but he was a master at putting it over and lip syncing to them as well. Not everyone is so good at lip syncing, but he really was.
And another thing that was important, I think, in Bing's filmography is how Bing Crosby adapted country music to the pop world way before other artists were doing that. Because of course, when he sings some of those songs in his musical westerns from the 1930s, he's doing something that really no other pop singer had done before. Of course, there would be country singers like Gene Autry and Roy Rogers who would come later and do movie musicals that basically were built around their country songs. But Bing Crosby was one of the very first pop singers that actually adapted country music to the medium of pop music to make it in that way more palatable and a lot more commercial for a wider audience. And I think some of the songs that he sings in movies, The Last Roundup would be one of them, for example, I would say. But
that wasn't in the film though. It was Empty Saddle.
Empty Saddle, that's right. That's right, Empty Saddles. That was very important in the development of country music, which was not very well thought of, not very well appreciated by a large audience in those days outside of the South, and people like Bing Crosby helped through the movies and through the records, make it a lot more popular in the 1930s.
Yes, I'm an old cowhand.
I'm an Old Cowhand, which is actually a pop song by Johnny Mercer, where Mercer wrote both the lyrics and the music,
Yeah,
which was
right.
which was odd for Mercer, because I've always thought, and I think I've told you this before, that to me Mercer is one of the best poets that the U.S. gave the world in the 20th century. But he's always, seen mostly as a lyricist. But if you look at the songs that he's written, the lyrics that he's written, songs like Early Autumn, for example, he was just not simply a lyricist or a songwriter. He did have a poetic element to a lot of his lyrics. And now that Bob Dylan has been awarded the Nobel Prize a few years ago, it wouldn't be a bad idea to vindicate some of these songwriters from the Great American Songbook that do have a poetic element to their songs. But anyway, yeah, I'm an Old Cowhand is a good example of what I was talking about.
Of course, Bing is an actor. I mean, I've never seen this, but he did a TV program where he's a singer dying of cancer. I can't think of what it's called now. But it sounds like I was very good acting in that one too. It'll come to me in a moment what it was called.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've ever seen that, unfortunately.
No, it's. I can probably. I'll look it up later. What else did he do on TV where he acted well? There were one or two things, weren't there, where he was Dr. Cook's Garden, of course. That's the one when he plays a murderer. The likable Bing character he plays throughout, but quietly he's murdering people. Have you seen that?
That one I have not seen. No,
it's on YouTube, so it's well worth you catching that. It starts off with Bing killing one of his patients quite early on. Then after that, he seems all nice and serene until something else goes wrong and he kills them. And of course, his pupil, who he trained and went off to university, has now come back and realizes that people are dying and guesses what's happening. And it's all very dramatic. I won't spoil the ending for you. No, you must catch that. It's a wonderful form. He's got a beard throughout it, but at times it's a charming being, but underneath he's a murderer.
Now you mentioned before High Society, and I think that's also an important movie in the Bing Crosby canon. Of course, 1956. There's Grace Kelly, there's Frank Sinatra, and of course Louis Armstrong comes back, and his band at the time appears as well with him. In fact, the Newport Jazz Festival plays a little bit of a role in the plot of that film, and that's the reason why Louis Armstrong and his bandmates are there. But the idea is that Bing Crosby liked Louis Armstrong, Satchmo, so much that he just wanted to have him in the movie with him. And it really is one of my favorite Bing Crosby movies for many reasons. I think the music, of course, is excellent. We're talking about Cole Porter and one of his last musicals, really, that he wrote a score for. At the time, I think he was wheelchair bound already, and he had lots of health problems, but he was still a fine songwriter, the way he always was, Cole Porter. And I think sometimes critics do a disservice when they think about High Society and they compare High Society with the Philadelphia Story. I mean, High Society is a remake of the Philadelphia Story, but not quite. It's just a musical version of it with lots of changes. And I think it hinges on the great music by Cole Porter and also fine performances from Grace Kelly, from Bing Crosby, and from Frank Sinatra. What do you think about High Society? And then let's talk a little bit also about Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby as actors. They did appear in a couple of movies together, and I think it's well worth comparing them a little bit as actors. What do you think about High Society, Malcolm?
I like High Society. It's a lovely film. the critics were very sniffy about it when it first came out because they preferred the Philadelphia story. Um, it's often the same script is used in High Society, but look now, High Society is a classic. It's been shown time and time again all over the place. I don't see much of the Philadelphia story, do you? You know, all right, it was black and white, but
And I like the
yes,
Philadelphia story too for different reasons. So what I was trying to say before is that we should not, compare the two movies because they're not one and the same.
no. That's you're absolutely right. That's what the critics were doing when it first came out, which was wrong. Sinatra's an actor. I mean, he was a very good actor, wasn't he? All right, he developed over the years. Um, um, I mean, the classic one, the From Here to Eternity.
From Here to Eternity that earned
I
him
mean,
the Oscar and his comeback and everything. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, there was another one when he played a murderer. What was that called? An assassin who going to kill the president.
Oh yeah, the Manchurian Candidate. Or no,
Oh no,
suddenly,
that suddenly that's it. Yeah,
which
yeah.
they
Oh,
actually they that the problem was that then JFK was assassinated and then that
I
movie
know. Yeah,
suffered from that. Really, it's a great movie. Suddenly with Sinatra,
yeah.
absolutely.
No, he's an excellent actor, Sinatra. He really was. Can't fault him at all. I mean, some of the Devil at 4 o'clock. Though that was another one he made, wasn't it? And what was that one when he's in a prison camp? Ryan's Express.
Von Ryan's Express. That's right.
On Ryan's Express. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
No, excellent actor, very believable, and always enjoyed seeing him in films. I mean, in High Society, Sinatra has to play this not particularly likable reporter who gradually becomes nice as the film goes on. And of course, we had the great song, Well, Did You Ever, which has got to be a classic, isn't it?
Absolutely. Great song, really well sung and acted out by the two of them together. It's just a classic moment, really, of the two of them together. I love whenever I think of Bing Crosby and Sinatra together, I love the radio shows they did together in the 40s because a lot of them, well, they played on this idea that there was a rivalry between the two of them, which I never really believed that there was much of because, of course, Bing was more than established as an artist by the time Frank Sinatra came along. But then there's also all those corny jokes about Sinatra being thin and that kind of thing. But by the time they started making a couple of movies together, they were both established artists, both great in their own right. And it's just wonderful to see them interact in scenes like Well, Did You Ever, and then later in Robin and the Seven Hoods in the 1960s.
Robin and the Seven Hoods. I remember going to see that at the cinema, and it was okay until Bing came on. After an hour, Bing appears, and the whole film changed in my book. He added so much class to it with the songs and Mr. Booze and the other songs. Absolutely great. Of course, but didn't require. Well, he had to act a little bit. He had to play this broken down fella. Yeah, good film.
What differences do you think there are as far as Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra are concerned as actors? I've always had the feeling that Bing Crosby took himself a lot less seriously than Frank Sinatra did as an actor. I mean, I know that in some of the films he goes for serious roles and he wants to do a good job, but I feel like the persona that Crosby created for himself is a less serious persona than that of Frank Sinatra. And I think after Sinatra was awarded the Oscar for From Here to Eternity, he really seems to take himself quite seriously as an actor with a lot of the roles that he chooses. The Joker is Wild, Manchurian Candidate, Von Ryan's Express, all those movies that you mentioned before.
Yes. What was that other film where he was nominated when he's a drug addict?
Yeah, The Man with the Golden Arm. And that's Otto Preminger, I think, directing that one.
Not a particularly nice film, but again, Sinatra was very good in it.
And there's a jazz component to it. This is another thing that's interesting, that both Bing Crosby movies and Sinatra movies do have that certain jazz element sometimes.
Mm, mm, yeah. So completely different actors, but very effective in their different ways, weren't they? And Sinatra, as an actor, he didn't try to be particularly likable, did he? Whereas I often think Bing was trying to be likable. Well, that may be unfair. I'd have to sit down and consider those thoughts, but to just off the top of my head, that's what I
I
thought.
guess it just depends on the movie, but I think in general you're right. Of course, Sinatra starts out with Gene Kelly, and those early musicals to me are just delightful. Not just because of Frank, but also because of Gene Kelly, who was a fantastic actor.
I would say, I mean, Bing could dance a bit. Sinatra was a bit better, I think, as a dancer.
Well, he had a better he had a better teacher, maybe.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
It's funny that Sinatra always would say regarding high society that Grace Kelly only had to open her mouth once and she got an Oscar for best song, and he
Yeah,
never did, even though his
yeah,
career was stretched out over several decades. But
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
now, Malcolm, what happens to Bing Crosby in the '60s and '70s? As far as films, because of course his output decreases in the '60s and '70s. In the '60s we have movies like you mentioned, Road to Hong Kong from 1960, Robin and the Seven Hoods from '64 with the Rat Pack. Then there's Stagecoach in 1966. What do you think about that? Because I often think that it's very difficult to remake classics, like when somebody tries to remake Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock, for example. I think Gus Van Sant tried to do that a few years ago, and it just didn't work very well. I don't think. Stagecoach is a color remake of the
I
classic
thought
John Ford film. What do you think about that one from
I thought it was an
1966?
excellent film. I did. I mean, good performances from all the characters. Bing was outstanding, and I thought he might get nominated for that. Quite honestly, but again, it's like Philadelphia Story in High Society. People are sniffy about the remakes, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
But standalone, it's an excellent film.
Mm-hmm.
We've sat and watched it not too long ago.
I just think it's a difficult thing to do. Of course, Gordon Douglas was a fine director, and if somebody was going to do it, Gordon Douglas definitely knew what he was doing. Then you have Anne Margaret, Van Heflin, Slim Pickens, who also sang some country music, Keenan Wynn. I mean, really, the cast is a good cast for that Stagecoach
Mm,
from '66.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I think it's unfairly written off in many ways. It's well worth seeing. A big scene when uh, he has to drink salt to make him sick, and he's sick out the window. It's repulsive, but he does it very well.
He does seem Bing Crosby does seem to slow down quite a bit though in the '60s and '70s as far as movie making goes.
Yes, well, the commitment to make a film. I mean, Stagecoach. I bet he regretted getting involved in that because it took months. The weather was bad. They had to move locations and hang around while the weather stopped raining. Then they'd have a week off till the weather. He must have got very cross. Actually, he wouldn't have been paid a fortune for it, would he? It must have taken 3 or 4 months of his life, which he would have resented. He could be playing golf and doing other things, going to the races, other things he liked to do. Um,
So,
but he
so do
was
you
good.
think that the main reason why he disliked making movies was just the whole process of it?
I think he probably was, quite honestly. Um,
Hmm.
too long. I mean, at Robin and the Seven Hoods, uh, it was agreed he would do so many weeks, and then they changed their mind halfway through, saying, "Well, come back in a month and we'll do another scene." And he really didn't want to do that, so he got his legal team to get involved to sort it out. Well, I think he was paid $25,000 a week or something like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
it was, I think he did 4 weeks on that. Yeah,
I think
I bet Stagecoach would have cured him, I reckon. And
mhm.
also, he said he could never get decent scripts. He was sent many scripts as far as we can make out, but he just couldn't find any that suited him. He didn't like the kind of morals of some of the films. some of the things that were said and done in films, he didn't want to get involved in. I think it appalled him when he went to the cinema and saw some of these films. He couldn't take it in. They're not going to do that, are they? And yes, they are, and I did it.
Well, what I was going to say is that I think his involvement in movies, sort of in the '60s and '70s, sort of mirrors the rest of his career in many ways, because he decreased TV appearances, he decreased recordings as well, although he kept making records, but not as many as he had done before. So I think as far as movies go, it's something similar. I was always very happy to see him in That's Entertainment, though.
Yes.
I think that's something that, I mean, it's a good idea for MGM to come up with this compilation of some of the best movie musicals that are presented by some of the people that appeared in them originally. Sinatra's in there, and Crosby's in there, and many others. But what I think is interesting is his segment in That's Entertainment shows what a great reader he was, what a great speaking voice he was. And that's something that always floors me every time I hear Bing Crosby talk and present something. He just does it better than anybody else. And I think, don't you think that that speaking voice that he had definitely must have helped him in his career as an actor?
Oh, undoubtedly, yeah, absolutely. And he was ideal to be a narrator as well, wasn't he? A number of films he was a narrator. That Russian thing, what that was called, I don't know. It's all about the Russia documentary, travel documentary, and he narrated that.
Oh yeah, and he did, of course, very famously Ichabod, the Ichabod Crane
Ichabod,
part of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, for Walt Disney.
Absolutely brilliant, that is. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not just that he narrates, but he does the voices for several characters. He sings the songs. Of course, the Mr. Toad part was done by Basil Rathbone, who was a good actor in his own right and had a nice speaking voice. And I enjoy that part of the film. But then you get to Bing Crosby, and when he says, "Well, us here in the colonies also," and it's just a completely different sort of approach to narration, and his voice is just perfect for that kind of thing. So I'm glad that he made some spoken voice records, and that he narrated movies, and that he did records where he was reading parts of books and things like that, poems, etc.
The links he did on the musical autobiography set are great as well, aren't they?
Absolutely. I just the musical autobiography is a great idea, and it was also an idea that was picked up by other people.
Yeah, they did one for Louis Armstrong, didn't they?
Louis Armstrong did it, Nat King Cole did it. Different singers in the '50s did it, but Bing Crosby just had the right voice for that, and I just love the fact that he re-recorded some of those early songs with Buddy Cole, because it gives you a chance to compare the originals and the musical autobiography versions, and just shows how Bing evolves from the 1930s to the 1950s very well. When you take a song, like Temptation, for example, or some of the earlier ones, even Muddy Water, it's just wonderful. But he had the voice for that, and I think that kind of speaking voice, the musical quality of his voice was just very important in his makeup as an actor.
That's right. One thing I ought to mention, we're so lucky nowadays. I told you how I used to go all the way around Birmingham trying to see Billings' old films. Nowadays on YouTube, we've got so many of them in good quality. The 1936 version of Anything Goes, which is hard to find, it's on YouTube. Very good quality indeed.
Also, the big broadcast of '32 that, even though he's a little stony, like you said, it's still a movie I love, not just because of Bing, but also because of all the other entertainers that appear in the movie with him. And you can find that on YouTube as well, and fairly good quality for the time.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, we're
So,
very lucky
and
to have him.
Malcolm, I was thinking, as we're winding down the conversation, there's still a couple of questions that I would like to ask you, just so that we can talk briefly about this, and then finish this yearly Bing Crosby podcast within the Jazz Flashes podcast series here on my YouTube channel. Um, Tell me a little bit, if you would, in what ways do you think that Bing Crosby evolved throughout the decades in his career as an actor? Because he starts out as an actor in musicals. Mostly, he becomes an actor because he is a famous singer. He's possibly the most famous singer in the world in the 1930s, definitely in America, possibly in the world in the 1930s. And so he becomes an actor because of that, creating a certain persona at some point. But how does he evolve as the 40s, the 50s come along?
Well, one thing we have to remember, when he was at university, he was in the drama society and had leading roles and well received leading roles. So he had quite a bit of background before he got into films. I think probably in his early films he had to do what the directors told him. But as he got more and more powerful, he was able to say, "No, I'm not going to have my ears stuck back anymore." And he could then develop what the role he wanted and the personality he wanted to put over. And, I think what you see is what the relaxed Bing Crosby coming across, and it got better as the years went by, and he was able to show more and more emotions as he got more confident, I think, into the 40s. And the closing scene in Bells of St. Mary's, when Ingrid Bergman's leaving and he wants to call her back. And you watch his face there, all the emotions that go through his face. It's brilliant acting. He doesn't say anything. He's thinking, can I? Should I? I can't do this. Sister. And then she comes back and just dial over her O'Malley. A lovely scene again, reduces me to tears most times I see it. But that was acting. I think that's what he'd learned over the years. He really had.
To what extent do you think that Bing Crosby in some of those films may actually be playing himself? How much of himself do you think there is in his work as an actor, if anything?
I think he was playing a lot of himself. Yes, in fact, the Bing Crosby character, pal of mine had a theory that the Bing Crosby character is Bing's dad. And the religious side was his mother. So the serious side of Bing came from his mother, but when he wanted to be light-hearted and likable, that was his dad. Which I think
it's an interesting theory, and there's definitely Bing as an actor definitely, in my view, evolves as time goes on. It's just like any actor that has had a career spanning 40 years, he would. I think he starts out playing himself a lot more than he does later on. So, a lot of the 1930s movies basically, draw on his popularity as a singer, as, would be the case with any popular singer, happened to Elvis Presley, happened even, I would say, to Al Jolson and, a lot of the, popular artists that came later, including the Beatles and several others. But as time goes on, I think he takes acting more seriously, and I think he goes for wider ranging roles, and I think that's what makes it a lot more interesting. And I would say, not just because I am a huge, as you are, also Bing Crosby fan. Bing Crosby in a movie just makes the movie more interesting to me. Not just because you get to hear him sing in some of them, or many of them, but just the fact that he is there and you can see him and hear him and look at the way he acts. I'm thinking of some cameo appearances that he did. Let's Make Love, for example, with Yves Montand and Marilyn Monroe, right? That segment where he appears is just delightful. And it just has to do with the fact that, of course, he's playing himself, but all he needs to do is play himself in some cases, and that's attractive and that's appealing to me as a viewer. But I do appreciate the
Pepe
way
was
that
another
he
film.
evolved.
Pepe was another film where he had a lovely cameo.
Mhm.
It was a long, boring film, but Bing's cameo lifted it for me.
That's what I mean. It does put you in a different frame of mind when you see Bing Crosby on screen. And it sort of happened to a lot of actors though at the time. If you think of Rudy Vallee, who was one of the uh, biggest rivals of Bing Crosby in the early years of his career. Of course, Russ Columbo was as well, but he tragically passed away. But Rudy Vallee, if you think of the movie The Vagabond Lover, he is very stony and he's just not a very good actor at that point because he was a singer that was trying to act. But later on in the 50s and the 60s, he becomes a really great character actor. And there is a certain evolution that happens there that I think to a certain degree also happened in the case of Bing Crosby, even though, when we think of Bing Crosby, we think of him primarily as a singer. But the dozens upon dozens of movies that he's made, sometimes are a little bit overlooked because we think of him primarily as a singer. But he was an actor, and he was a good actor, I think. And there are plenty of examples of that. So, Malcolm, to finish our conversation this morning or this afternoon for you, there's a 6-hour difference between Tennessee and Wilmslow. Did I say that correct?
Right. Yeah.
Are there any lesser known movies by Bing Crosby that you would recommend? Now, his filmography is huge. Uh, and of course, we all know some of the big hits that he had, and we've mentioned a lot of them. But what movies, movies would you recommend to anybody out there who may want to watch a Bing Crosby movie that they may never have heard of? And I'm going to start with one, not because I only have one. I only prepared one, although there are many. But the one that I would recommend is going back to 1933 and is Going Hollywood. I just love Going Hollywood. Raoul Walsh is the director, and he is a director that I greatly appreciate. It's got Marion Davis. It's one of those, pre-Hays Code musicals that I was mentioning before that are sometimes overlooked. And there are some great songs in that film. Of course, the plot is not the point. Sometimes, some of my students, complain about the old musicals and they say, but there's no plot. The plot's not interesting. Well, that's not the point. The point is the music. The point is the acting. And Going Hollywood has great songs on there, like Our Big Love Scene, not one of the most famous Bing Crosby songs, but there it is. There's Beautiful Girl, which is a great song. He also sings a little bit of Just an Echo in the Valley. And then songs like Going Hollywood, We'll Make Hay While the Sun Shines, which is, a witty lyric right there. After Sundown, and of course, as you mentioned before, the one that Bing Crosby always thought that Dean Martin could do a good job with, Temptation, which is one of his classics. So Going Hollywood would be the movie that I would recommend to anybody who wants to watch a movie that is maybe not as well known as Going My Way or White Christmas or Holiday Inn or any of the other big classics. What about you, Malcolm? What do you have?
The one I think people ought to see. I mean, all right, it's not particularly entertainment. It's called Little Boy Lost, and it's the story of a radio reporter who's married to a French girl. The war comes and he gets cut off, and his wife disappears, feared dead, and his little boy disappears also. Now, years later, he's trying to find this little boy, and he comes back to France in the early 50s and tries to put it together. And it's quite emotional for him when they think they found the boy, but he can't relate to this boy. He can't be my son. And it's a tremendous role from Bing. It really is. There's a few songs stuck in there just to entertain the boy, really. But it's dramatic role, and again, very moving. Black and white, somber. And of course, Bing's wife was dying at the time from cancer, and he knew that. And he had to play a scene discussing his screen wife dying. How he did that, I don't know. But some very good acting. And if you have not seen it, it's one you ought to see. As you ought to see Dr. Cook's Garden as well. Two very different roles for Bing Crosby, but I highly recommend that you see them.
You mentioned before that there are many of those older Bing Crosby movies that are available on YouTube, and we can watch them there in their original version. Some of his movies, of course, are available on DVD and Blu-ray. I showed a few of them. This is Birth of the Blues and Blue Skies. Over here, I have one of my favorites, which is Pennies from Heaven, which we mentioned before and we showed before. I also have here The Emperor Waltz and A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. This one is a double feature that includes Holiday Inn and Going My Way. He got the Oscar for that film right there. And there's a couple of Road to movies, Road to Bali and Road to Rio, which is also a fun one. Out of these two, I prefer Road to Rio, but my favorite, as I said before, was Road to Morocco. And there are many others, some of them have been reissued lately. Is there any Bing Crosby film that you wish had been given the DVD or the Blu-ray treatment that just, it hasn't happened as of 2022? Kind of like a wish for the new year.
There's so many, really. Dr. Rhythm, I don't think that's ever been given the treatment. Has Mr. Music? I can't remember whether Mr. Music's been like.
Yeah, I don't think so. No, now that you mentioned that, I don't think I've seen it.
But Little Boy Lost, of course.
Yeah, Little Boy Lost, I was able to watch years ago on Netflix here in the U.S. They had it for a while. I'm talking about maybe 10 years ago, I don't know, for streaming. And that's how I got to watch it. But it has, basically disappeared from the streaming platforms as far as I know. So there are still many Bing Crosby movies that we as fans would wish that were reissued on Blu-ray or DVD with improved sound and improved image. Now, you may also be interested, anybody out there, in the soundtracks to Bing's movies, which have been issued on CD. And I'm going to show you a couple of CDs here that I enjoy. There's this Going Hollywood series from Jasmine Records over in the UK. I have 3 volumes here. This is volume 1 from 1930 to 1936. It's a 2 CD set that includes the soundtracks to some of his early movies. Then we have volume 2 here with Bing Crosby as a cowboy right there on the cover. And we have the movies from 1936 to 1939. Some of the movies are Anything Goes, Rhythm on the Range, Pennies from Heaven, Waikiki Wedding, and several others, Double or Nothing. This is also from Jasmine Records in the UK. The 3rd volume here has Bing and Bob in one of the Road to movies. I believe it's Road to Morocco. We're off on the road to Morocco. Like Webster's Dictionary, we're Morocco bound. And this is volume 3 from 1940 to 1944. I think there's also a volume 4, but I seem to.
There's a volume 4. I'm just trying to put my hand on it.
There is a volume 4, and I have been, I know I have it, but I just didn't find it on my shelf. So that is a good way to have the soundtracks to the earlier films from Bing Crosby. There are many others that have been issued on CD. But one that I would like to mention, because also on the channel, I've done a Spanish language video about this release, is one that just came out. on Sepia Records. I have it right here, and I want to show it to everybody out there. It's White Christmas and Holiday Inn. Just came out this year on Sepia Records, also in the UK. And this includes the White Christmas soundtrack and also the Holiday Inn soundtrack, including a Holiday Inn radio preview and several unreleased tracks. Can you tell us a little bit about this record, Malcolm, if there's anything that you would like to add? Because I've been listening to this nonstop in the last several weeks.
It's wonderful quality. It's been put together. I haven't been involved in the preparation of that. It's been done by somebody else, but it's absolutely top class. And the radio show promoting Holiday Inn, I've never heard that before. There's tracks I've never heard. So it's absolutely superb. And believe it or not, it got into some charts over in the States, holiday charts or something. I think it's probably one of the first Sepia CDs ever to achieve that. So it's top class throughout. It really is. You were mentioning the volume 4 of the Going Hollywood.
There it is. And I know I have it. That was the one with the dog on the cover. That you actually mentioned before during our conversation. That's volume 4. What years are those? Because I know I have that.
44 to 49.
44 to 49. So if you have all 4 volumes, you have the soundtracks from the 1930s and the 1940s. So
I put together the tracks for a possible volume 5. I'm not sure whether it'll ever get released, but I've done it for my own entertainment. Because I've got all the films, so I can take the things. But I mean, those aren't just the soundtracks, of course. There are some commercial recordings in that as well. Mm-hmm. Jeff Milne put it together for Jasmine. Jeff's 98 now, still going strong, and he put that together. Superb job he did.
Well, Malcolm, as every year, this is a very exciting day for me, the day when we get to sit, and thanks to the wonders of technology, we get to share our views on different aspects regarding the music and the career and the figure and the life of the great Harry Lillis Crosby, better known as Bing Crosby. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I look forward to many more years where we can just sit down and chat about Bing Crosby. In order to just close today's broadcast, I just wanted to mention that both Malcolm and I are co-editors of Bing Magazine, the journal of the magazine of the Bing Crosby fan club, which is the International Club Crosby, the longest running fan club in the history of the world. We can safely say that. Just to remind, if you would, Malcolm, everybody out there, if they're interested in becoming a part of the ICC, which has nothing to do with cricket, that ICC is the International Club Crosby, what do they need to do?
Well, contact Perry Huntoon. You go to the Bing Magazine website and you'll find contact details there. And we'll be delighted to have you, and you'll be amongst friends.
And the website is Bing Magazine, one word, bingmagazine.co.uk. For those in the US, it's not .com, it's .co.uk. bingmagazine.co.uk. Malcolm, thanks again. Another year. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I hope that you and yours will have a wonderful holiday season. And I don't hope this, I know this, it will be full of Bing Crosby music.
Thanks, Anton. Have a great Christmas and a Happy New Year.
We also would like to send a happy holidays and Happy New Year to anybody listening out there. If you have any comments or any questions, just leave them underneath the video in that section devoted to the comments, reserved for comments, and we'll be happy to respond to any comments or questions that you may have. This has been a new episode of the Jazz Flashes podcast, our yearly Bing Crosby podcast. And it's the 7th year where we're doing this. We've spoken about Bing Crosby as an actor, what made him special as an actor. My name is Anton Garcia-Fernandez, talking to you from Jackson in the state of Tennessee in the United States of America. And I've been chatting for the last hour and 15 minutes or so with my friend Malcolm Macfarlane over in the United Kingdom. Ours is the copyright of this video, which was recorded in thanks to the technology of Zoom in December of the year 2022. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks for any comments. Listen to some great Bing Crosby music over the holidays and throughout the next year. And now it's time to sign off. Thank you all, and bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.